When I talk about anesthesia being commoditized, I'm thinking as an industry. But then, so that's a market, right? The entire industry is a market. And then we have micro markets inside the industry. So at the hospital level, at the city level, and regional levels, the service can be, you can differentiate even with inside of a commodity through quality, through service. Our organization's growing rapidly. I think we've probably picked up 25 to 30 new facilities in the last 14 to 16 months, hired roughly
Jeez.
300 to 400 anesthesia clinicians. And we're not doing that because we're the lowest priced part of the commodity chain, right? We're doing it through differentiators, through service, through culture. And what Randy mentioned, the most important part, being able to recruit and retain providers. You'd be amazed. Like we go into hospitals, we start day one, they need 14 operating rooms covered. And when we start on day one with 14 anesthetizing locations covered, the surgeons, the hospital administrators, they are like
They're,
on cloud
they're shocked.
nine because the previous group was only sending 6 or 7 a day. And surgeries were lasting all night, being pushed to the next day and the next day and the next day. And they were losing volume to different places. So, while it is a commodity, that's the macro market, right? That's how it's viewed. But on the micro level, the individual hospital, the individual regions, there's more differentiators at that point.
Tracy, I didn't mention at the top of the call that you're the incoming president of the AANA, right? I think most listeners of the podcast know what that stands for, the American Association of Nurse Anesthesiology. And Randy, you've spoken about this before. ASA and AANA don't, communicate a lot. I think that's a fair characterization, right? And even look, I learned about this bill. You guys see it on the screen there. I learned about this bill through Jenny Schmidt, who I'm not sure what her official role is. I think it's like the Queen of Oklahoma or something like that. She's done a lot of great work there. She mentioned that they coordinated with the Oklahoma Society of Anesthesiologists, but I noticed conspicuously that there's nothing here about that level of coordination. Randy, do you want to just finish your comment there, and then we'll go to Tracy for your reaction on this newsletter?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. So this is what happens, and we see this in other advocacy-related areas. When there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to solving a really difficult problem, then the states will come at it, right? So we've seen this in Ohio. We're now seeing this in other states where the state associations, whether they're doing it in a coordinated way or they're just running at this independently, they are now trying to address these reimbursement issues, these policy decisions. My hypothesis here is this is what we're going to see. We're going to see state by state some legislative action to try to reverse some of these policy decisions, which is going to be very expensive, obviously, and going to take a very, very long time and will not be completely successful. Obviously, the AANA has wanted action from the federal government on this, which would obviate the need from having to do a 50-state strategy, which is essentially what is going to have to happen. And obviously, not all 50 states are going to have the political capital, the financial capital, or just the fire and the belly to come after this stuff. So you're going to start to see states where CRNAs are in a very good position from a reimbursement perspective. And you're going to see states where CRNAs are getting screwed. And you're going to see 15, 20, 30% delta between what a CRNA is reimbursed with at QZ versus what an anesthesiologist is reimbursed. So that is the unfortunate, but undoubtedly the direction we're going to be going here, unless there's some kind of Hail Mary intervention by the federal government, which...
Well, federal government's known for its efficiency and effectiveness. So I'm sure we're going to see that. Yeah, at some point, we've got to start laying down arms, so to speak, on these reimbursement issues. Tracy, again, not asking you to speak on behalf of the ANA or anything, but you have a unique view, right? So can you speak to this from all your different hats? I think this is a question a lot of people are wondering. Why aren't we working together more, right? And maybe this is the opening back from Thoughtbridge in the 80s or 90s.
Yeah, look, it's a great question. And just to reiterate, these are my viewpoints. These are not the viewpoints of the association, of the American Association of Nurse Anesthesiology, not the viewpoints of the anesthesia management company that I work for. But I can tell you that the ASA and the AANA agree on about 85 to 90% of everything, right? It's that 10 to 15% of things that makes collaboration really, really difficult. And a lot of times when you start with those 10 or 15% of differences, and that's the table stakes that's laid on the ground and saying, hey, until we agree on these things, we can't do anything together. When that is what's led in conversations, the conversations immediately die. And I can tell you historically, and Randy has a viewpoint into this that extends before my years of being involved in the association, that frequently a lot of those conversations start with that. In other words, we know we're never going to agree on these things. However, until we do, we can't work together.
Right.
Is that, Randy, is that your experience as the CEO of the AANA back before I
Yeah.
became
Yeah.
involved?
Yeah. I think that's right. I think that's right. And then it's, not to get us too far into the wilderness on this topic, but I would say it's also a reflection of the governance and leadership of both organizations, right? And
Mhm.
so it's really hard if a lot of the people who make it to the board of directors at the ASA, and I would say to some degree at the AANA, are on the militant end of these 10% issues and are not really attached to the business side or the consequences of what happens when these reimbursement issues play out, then they're going to be focusing on the 10% issues.
You don't want to name names there, Randy? You don't want to name any of the militant people?
I mean,
I'm just kidding.
no,
I'm
let's
just kidding.